Following the popularity of bringing back familiar monsters from the Showa era in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah and Godzilla vs. Mothra, Toho resurrected another legendary adversary to the King of the Monsters, Mechagodzilla. This time, however, it would not be operated by aliens seeking to take over the world, but instead by the newly formed G-Force, a human-led military organization dedicated to defeating Godzilla once and for all in 1993's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham and I am here with Chris, and today we are going to be talking about Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, or the American title is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 from 1993. Now, I have fond memories of this one. I remember watching this one a lot as a kid. Again, I was a big Heisei nerd. This one's fun. I always liked Mechagodzilla. The Godzilla design, in the Heisei era is one of my favorites. This film's fun. It's we'll get to the tier ranking later, of course, but I enjoy this one. On the rewatch, I love the soundtrack, and I know me and Chris highly agree on the soundtrack. And what do you remember about this one? I'm sure you were introduced to this one as a young fellow as well.
Yeah, definitely in that sort of late 90s, 1998, 1999, when Sony was bringing these over, mostly as a means of cross-promotion with the 1998 Godzilla film they made. They were bringing all of these Heisei films over, so, King Ghidorah through Destroya, and that's when I saw it in those VHS days, and I was always a big fan of this one. This one has a lot of kaiju action in it, a lot of Godzilla screen time, a lot of laser light shows, a lot of, robots and technology and things like that. So I always liked this one a lot. I still like it quite a bit. I think it has a really dumb American title. I understand why they put the 2 on there, but the logic of it just doesn't track for me, so I hate that there's a 2 on it, but I can live with that, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the title one way or another, it could easily confuse you. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and it's like, oh, is this a remake of the 74, or is this, and then you see Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, and it's like, okay, is this a sequel to the 74 and 75 films? So, I mean, you can look at it and be confused either way if you're not sure.
Yeah, I guess the thing was that they absolutely felt that they had to have something that wasn't the original Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla title. In Japan, the original one didn't use verses in 74. They used the Japanese word, so it was Godzilla Tai Mechagodzilla, TAI. That's like their word for it. So when they just did Godzilla and used the verses in Japan, it was just Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. So that separates it enough for them. Over here, the original was just Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, so I guess they felt they needed to differentiate it enough, just like calling it Godzilla and Mothra the Battle for Earth. But so I understand they're like, well, this is Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. This is the second one. Like, it's the redo, but it's like the logic of it in America, when we see 2 on something, we assume that it's a part 2 to something else. So it's like, this is not a sequel to Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and this is not even the second Godzilla Mechagodzilla movie. It's technically the third after Terror of Mechagodzilla. So it's just like one of those things where like an OCD fan like me just like absolutely loses my mind over a title like this, and I worry about it way more than I should, but it drives me nuts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I know Mechagodzilla's in it, so half the time I don't even pay attention to the title. But I'll get into some background of the film for you. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is a 1993 Japanese kaiju film directed by Takao Okawara, written by Wataru Mimura, and produced by Shogo Tomiyama. Produced and distributed by Toho Studios. This is the 20th film in the Godzilla franchise, as well as the 5th film to be released during the franchise's Heisei era. The film features the fictional monster characters Godzilla, along with Baby Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, and Rodan, or I know they call him in the English dub Rhydon, I believe it is.
Yeah, I think it's like Radon in like
Yeah,
like the element Radon, you know. So yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting.
I always hated that. It annoyed me since I was young, and still does to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I think the element Radon was part of the original inspiration for the original Rodan's name. I thought I heard that somewhere, but because like a translation thing, and then other people say that it's like some sort of weird derivative like Pteranodon, but I don't know where you get Rodan or Radon out of Pteranodon. Again, I don't know if there's translation things and elements like that, but yeah, the pronunciation in the dub always kind of irked me, but it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, can't let it get to you too much.
No, if you nitpick in this franchise, you're just going to rip your hair out like I do.
Well, good thing my hair is short for the most part. I can't sit here and pull it too much.
Same here.
This film was released theatrically in Japan on December 11th, 1993. This was a commercial success, generating a combined $194 million, equivalent to $393 million in 2022 from the box office, book sales, and then the merchandise sales by 1994. So this film, with all the toys and everything, it was huge. It was massive. 393 million, equivalent to 2022, 194 million in 1994. That's massive for a Godzilla film.
Yeah, the merchandise in particular was just a huge part of that. For these were killing the merch sales back in the 90s, and like the Trend Masters series, that's what it was this line of figures, and that was the line of figures that was even big over here in the US, even though none of these movies in the mid 90s were being released in the US. So that just shows like how huge it was over in Japan, that even just purely as a toy line and a piece of pop culture, they were bringing these toys over to the US.
Yeah, and these were some of the first toys I had, and was this version of Mechagodzilla and Godzilla, yep. Little 6-inch or figures or 4-inch, whatever they were back then.
And they had those, and then they had the larger ones, the larger scale ones as well, and those were some of the ones that I had a couple of.
Yeah, I had so many. I can't even remember what all I had, to be honest with you. I wish I still had them to this day, as we were saying last episode, but as kids, we ruined them, and now we're like, damn it, shouldn't have done that.
Absolutely.
This film was released directly to pay-per-view television in the United States in 1998 by Sony Pictures Television, and was promoted as the last film in the Heisei series, and then was also promoted by a children's television program called Adventure Godzilla Land 2. Although this film wasn't the final entry in the Heisei series, it was followed by 2 films, including Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla and then Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Toho producers initially wished to avoid competing with TriStar's then upcoming 1998 Godzilla reboot.
Yeah, it's funny because that 1998 reboot had such a long gestation period that at one point it was expected that it was going to possibly be released in 1994, and then it was possibly going to be released in 1995, and then at one point maybe 96. Like literally, I think like the deal for that American Godzilla movie was made somewhere in 91 or 92, and I think it was expected like every year after that it was going to potentially release, but it ran into so many scheduling issues, script issues, budget issues that it was famously, under another director for a long time before Roland Emmerich came off of Independence Day and got on board. So it went through such a long gestation period that, there was a point where like each of these last 3 Heisei Godzilla movies was meant to be kind of like an ending point so that they could trade off to the American reboot and then revisit the Japanese Godzilla years later. But the American reboot kept getting pushed off, and these were making money, so Toho would just churn another one out for this year,
Yeah, and some of those early designs of Godzilla, Steve Miner, who directed Friday the 13th 2 and 3, was originally going to be the director for one of the early
Yeah,
scripts.
he was trying in the 80s. He was trying very hard in the 80s, and that was kind of like another wave. And that sort of attempt to revive Godzilla in the early to mid 80s is ultimately what kind of fed into Toho bringing Godzilla back in 84 for the 30th anniversary, because there was like a gestating, I think it was even going to be 3D at one point, because Friday the 13th 3 was in 3D, and it was even potentially going to be 3D. So that was going to happen in the 80s, and then this 90s one was like this whole different approach with Stan Winston doing the design and all of that.
Yeah, the earlier designs for the 80s one, I like that design better than what we got in 98, but I mean, we can always talk about that in the 98 episode coming up.
Yeah,
so
yeah. The 1980s design was actually like kind of surprisingly similar to the 1998 design in a weird way in terms of how it was looking. But the Stan Winston design for the 90s film, the unused 1994 script, the Stan Winston design, to me that's one of the greatest Godzilla designs that's never been put in a movie.
Oh yeah, that would have been awesome to see.
Yeah, I can only imagine like coming off the heels of Jurassic Park and all of the hype that Jurassic Park created, if you get like this a Godzilla movie the next summer or 2 years later with Stan Winston all over the practical effects and the digital effects and the design work and mixing it in like they did with Jurassic Park, where they used some CGI, some suits and animatronics and things of that nature. Like, I can only imagine how great, because that 1994 script for the Godzilla film, not to get us too far off topic, but it's an excellent script and certainly much better than the 1998 movie. And, it's fun to think about the what ifs.
Always, because there's always so many of them. But I'll give you a last little history or background on the film, which is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is generally well received by Godzilla fans for several reasons, including introducing what some consider the best incarnation of Mechagodzilla, but we'll get to that. Kazuo Miyauchi earned a Japanese Academy Prize nomination for the best sound for his work on the film. So, I mean, most fans like this film. I like this film. You like this film. So, I mean, I don't really have anything bad to say about it, but there's some background on the film.
Yeah, if I have to throw out just the one criticism I have with the movie, outside of the weird American title, it's that it's sort of for those that try to be selective in their marathons of leaving out movies they don't care for and watching movies they do care for, it sort of forces the inclusion of Godzilla versus King Ghidorah into the canon, because it's made. I love the idea of making Mechagodzilla from the remains of Mecha King Ghidorah. That's a cool concept, but it's like if you take issue with that whole time travel stuff, well then this movie sort of forces that to be a part of the story, because they're like, we used a robot from the future and it shows Mecha King Ghidorah. If they just sort of implied that this Mechagodzilla was made out of their own technology, their own developments, you could kind of step over Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. But because of the strong continuity between the two, they kind of go hand in hand. So that's a minor thing. The movie itself, once you get past that first minute and a half where that's the title and that is an issue, movie itself I think is a great time.
Well, yeah, because Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is clearly a must watch. I mean, there's no debating it.
Okay, yeah, sure. On that side of the aisle. Here's the thing. It leads to this one. I could, I can grit my teeth and just accept that whatever time travel in that movie makes sense. If it just has to be part of the story, so be it.
I'll take it. I'll take that as a win. I'll go ahead and drop the trailer for Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. We'll get into the plot synopsis, and then I'll come back, give you some numbers on the film right away, because there's some good numbers on this film that we could talk about the money and stuff it made from different sales and whatnot. So I'll go ahead and get into the trailer.
栗の赤ちゃんなんかじゃない。奴は一体どこへ行く気だ。
この子が呼び寄せたんでしょうか。
究極の戦闘マシン登場。
この島に踊りを置いて奴を待ち伏せます。
最後まであなたを守ってみせるからね。ゴジラが来る。
スーパーメカゴジラ合体完了。今度こそ奴に息の根を止めてやる。
ベビーゴジラをめぐる史上最大のバトルが始まる。ゴジラ対メカゴジラ。
In 1992, following the events of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, the United Nations establishes the United Nations Godzilla Countermeasure Center, UNGCC, to stop Godzilla. Their military branch, G-Force, salvages Mecha King Ghidorah's remains and reverse engineers them to build two anti-Godzilla machines, an aerial gunship called Garuda and a mecha modeled after Godzilla called Mechagodzilla. 2 years later, while on a mission to Adona Island, a Japanese team comes across what they assume is a large pteranodon egg, which gives off a telepathic signal that attracts Godzilla and Rodan, an adult pteranodon irradiated by nuclear waste. Godzilla critically wounds Rodan during the ensuing battle, while the research team escapes with the egg. It is taken to a research center in Kyoto, where it imprints on a young female scientist. When a baby Godzilla hatches from the egg, the research team concludes that the egg was left in the pteranodon nest with Rodan in a manner similar to the brood parasitism displayed by European cuckoos. Godzilla appears, once again responding to the creature's psychic call. The JSDF mobilizes Mechagodzilla, which intercepts Godzilla as it is heading to Kyoto. The two battle, with Mechagodzilla initially having the upper hand until Godzilla disables the robot with an energy pulse. Godzilla continues searching for Baby, with the scientist having discovered the telepathic link between the monsters, shielded from Godzilla. Frustrated, it destroys most of Kyoto before returning to the ocean. Tests on the baby reveal that it has a second brain in its hips that control the animal's movement. The UNGCC assumes that this is also holds true for Godzilla and decide to use Baby to bait Godzilla into another fight with Mechagodzilla. The G Crusher is installed in the Mechagodzilla, which will allow the robot to penetrate Godzilla's hide and destroy its second brain. Young psychic Miki Sagusa is ordered to become a part of Mechagodzilla's crew to locate Godzilla's second brain. While she is reluctant due to her mental connection with Godzilla, she agrees. The plan backfires when Rodan, having survived its battle with Godzilla and further mutated by radiation, responds to Baby's call and intercepts the UNGCC transport. In response, they send Mechagodzilla and Garuda after Rodan instead, which mortally wounds it. Godzilla arrives soon after and attacks Mechagodzilla. The fight is evenly matched until Mechagodzilla combines with Garuda to become Super Mechagodzilla and successfully paralyzes Godzilla. Suddenly, the dying Rodan, revived by Baby's call, begins flying towards it, but is shot down by Super Mechagodzilla, crashing atop Godzilla. Rodan's life force regenerates Godzilla's second brain and supercharges the monster. Now more powerful than before, Godzilla attacks and destroys Super Mechagodzilla with a high-powered, spiral-shaped atomic ray. Godzilla locates Baby, who is initially afraid of the giant. Mickey telepathically communicates with Baby, convincing it to go with Godzilla. The two monsters head out to the ocean together.
All right, Chris, what do you say? Let's get into some numbers on Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla.
Let's hear 'em.
So the budget was 1 billion yen, or equivalent to $9.5 million in 1993. The film sold 3.8 million tickets in Japan, earning 1.87 billion yen, or roughly 18 million in distributor rental income, and another 3.18 billion yen in gross receipts. And the film grossed a total box office revenue of 36 million, equivalent to 73 million in 2022. So, I mean, this film, I mean, it quadrupled its budget. So, I mean, you can't ask for a lot more than that.
And for a market like Japan, 73 million is still a good number. To kind of put that into perspective, the Super Mario Brothers movie that just released in Japan is Universal Studios' biggest film there. And I think they've said that it's the biggest US released movie in Japan. And it only just crossed 100 million in Japan. So for a movie to pull 73 million in Japan, that is not a bad number at all. It's a smaller market than America, so people sometimes don't have the proper perspective on the numbers. I mean, Shin Godzilla made what, 80 million or so in Japan. So I mean, and that was a wildly successful film, so people, so it's just important to keep the perspective on Japan being such a smaller market.
Yeah, and that's what's crazy is, like, if a movie is doing bad over here in the box office, they look for that overseas market to pick up the sales, and 9 out of 10 times they do. Whatever they make over here, they make almost as much over there, if not more.
Exactly, because you have just the sheer number of all of the markets, like America being the biggest. China potentially is the biggest, but China's a big market for their films. They can be a big market for certain Hollywood films, but they're unreliable in some regards because of Chinese tastes and censorship and things like that. But it's all of these other markets combined, the UK plus Japan, plus all of the South American markets, plus, Italy and South Korea. It's all of these markets combined that can really drive up a film's numbers.
Yeah, and it doesn't take long in those markets either, because it seems like they are rushing to the theaters overseas.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You'll see some films are much more heavily skewed toward making more of their money in North America, and then with other films, it's like they're almost designed to make next to nothing in North America, and they make all their bones everywhere else.
Yeah, for sure. And like the Meg too, the second film, that boomed overseas. It made nice money over here, but it made a good 60% of its earnings overseas, and that is probably gonna credit them to make a third Meg film.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a decline from the first one. And yeah, with that one, it was more like they made it specifically for the Chinese market and the international markets, and whatever it made in North America was just almost perceived as a bonus.
Yeah, it's like they just tried to almost make their budget back over here, and then whatever was made over there, it's like, all right, we're going to put this towards the next one. We're going to, we're going to keep trying to make money overseas and just break even over here, or vice versa.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the two Meg movies are still, I don't know about the second one necessarily, but I know the first Meg does hold the title for the highest grossing shark movie ever made. Maybe not adjusted for inflation, because Jaws was the biggest movie ever when it came out, but in terms of actual dollars, the first Meg holds the title as the biggest shark movie ever.
Yeah, I believe it's somewhere around like 500 million and change.
Yeah, and it looks like Meg 2 is creeping toward 400, so not a bad drop-off from one movie to another, considering how kind of, goofball and B-movie those movies are trying to be on purpose. It's pretty impressive numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about guys in suits and smashing miniatures, but CGI sharks, goofball,
Yeah. More so the tone. I mean, when you have like Jason Statham being like Action Man fighting a giant megalodon, it's more of just like the style. But I mean, yeah, we're in the market for these kind of movies. I mean, just because we love them doesn't mean we can't recognize that they're pretty cheeseball.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, some of those cheesy films like these, the Godzilla films and all that, they're your favorite because a lot of them you grow up on.
Exactly.
But in addition to its box office gross, the film generated another, and I got on some of this a little earlier. It was 158 million, equivalent to 320 million in 2022 from book sales and merchandise by 1994. which was for a combined 194 million total generated from the box office, making this film the most profitable non-animated Japanese film of all time.
Wow, impressive.
Yes, they were the book sales and everything. I can't imagine $158 million on books and toys and merchandise. That's insane to me.
Yeah, very impressive. Godzilla was burning on all cylinders as an IP back then.
For sure. I mean, this film, it has a rating of 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb. So I mean, it's a little above average. And 83% on Rotten Tomatoes and 89% of Google users like this film, which it's always high in the high 80s, low 90s. But I mean, it seems like this film is generally well received from everyone who's watched it or critics in general.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of people. No, you rarely get people naming this one as one of the lowest of the Heisei series or one of the non-favorites. I think it is generally well regarded, or at least considered kind of in the sort of, upper middle of the pack. It's not regarded as one of the worst by most people.
No, not at all. And then this doesn't hurt at all. Godzilla's on screen for 26 minutes and 56 seconds, or 25% of the film, which is the highest in the entire Godzilla franchise. And his first appearance is at 13 minutes and 48 seconds, or about 14% of the way into the film.
Yeah, that's certainly not a bad trait to have as a Godzilla movie.
No, not at all. And I mean, the Godzilla screen time you get in this, I mean, he's front and center. So I mean, he's not in the background, and so it's actually a good almost 27 minutes of him being front and center on camera on screen.
Yeah, that's darn near a third of the movie. And when you factor in that there's some occurrences like during the G-Force training where they're showing footage of Godzilla on screens, and of course you have little Godzilla screen time, and Rodan is a factor, and Mechagodzilla is a factor. There's just a lot of monster screen time and monster involvement in this movie if you even disregard Godzilla's significant screen time.
Yeah, because you got Rodan and Mechagodzilla, they have their little fight and battle, that's probably another 5-6 minutes, and then Godzilla and Rodan are fighting, and I mean, there's probably, out of what, this is a 106-minute movie or roughly something like that, I believe. I mean, you probably got 35 minutes of monster action, which like you said, that's a third of the film.
Yeah, that's significant. Those are the kind of numbers people are starving for sometimes.
Yeah, I like this film. I can't go wrong with the monster action in this one. There's plenty of it.
Yeah, and it gets toward the violent side as well. We get a couple of, some blood and guts just a little bit, in terms of Rodan spitting up some blood in a scene, Godzilla choking Rodan out and he's foaming at the mouth, and the what did they call it? The G Crusher, the two prongs that blast into Godzilla. Some nice monster violence always goes a long way as well.
Yeah, I mean this film. I mean Mechagodzilla kills him. He kills Godzilla in this one, and that's something you don't see a lot.
Yeah, and we get the tried and true, something that would be repeated in the MonsterVerse of one creature giving its sort of dying energy to Godzilla to revive him and supercharge him. I mean, that's a concept that's lifted straight out of this film into the MonsterVerse.
Yeah, and I like it. I like the Rodan giving his life energy and then almost like superpowering Godzilla in this film, and it's a nice touch. I mean, like I said, there's so much monster action in this film, that it takes a while to get to with little Godzilla and whatnot, but it's worth the wait and it's a fun watch.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm always more inclined toward the more sci-fi entries as opposed to the fantasy stuff. I can get into the fantasy stuff with Mothra and the twins, but I tend to kind of like a bit more of the sci-fi angle of it, a little bit less of the magic, a little bit less of the fairies, and a bit more of the super tech and just creatures and things like that. So this one's up that alley, and I like it.
Yeah, and it's fun. And with all the fun in this film you can have, I'm going to give you a couple fun facts. I don't have very many, but I'll give you a couple and see what you think of them.
Yeah, let's go for it.
This is the first film to portray Rodan without suitmation, instead portraying him with just various props and puppets on the little invisible cables.
Very nice. Yeah, you can kind of see it sometimes. It's a little stiff. You can kind of see it, but it works. It serves its purpose.
Yeah, I mean, he looks nice when he's flying. I always have a problem with flying monsters and their wings in these older films, not flapping once every 5 seconds, because I'm like, there's no way he's going to stay airborne. He's too heavy. He needs to be constantly flapping his wings.
and it's funny because that's one of those things that irks you, and for me, I got over my hangups about the wing flaps like very, very long ago, because it's just kind of the nature of them. So whereas I'll pull my hair out over time travel, you see the wings and you're like, no, that doesn't work. I kind of just roll with the wings how they are.
Yeah, everybody's a little different. I'm picky about that. I don't know what it is. I know in the MonsterVerse they corrected that, and but like I said, beggars can't be choosers with these films. When you're messing with props and animatronics and all that, or people in suits, you just got to take what they give you.
Yeah, I remember someone kind of joked. I think it was when George Lucas was making was making Star Wars Episode 1. There's the character of Watto, who is this kind of pot-bellied, weird kind of alien, but he has these tiny sort of hummingbird type wings that he flies with, and the animators and people working on the movie would question, it doesn't really look like those tiny wings are flapping in a way that would properly hold up Watto's kind of fat pot belly, body. And George Lucas kind of said, well, just kind of think of it as he's got some helium in his belly that's helping displace his weight, or something kind of odd like that, and just kind of roll with it, and the audiences will kind of roll with it, and it's kind of true, there's some things that different people will make different sort of leaps of believability for, and the wing one is just kind of one that I kind of always just roll with in that regard.
For sure. Another one was in the early version of this film called Godzilla vs. Berserk. Mechagodzilla would have been a metallic alien organism that arrived on Earth with the intent of making itself the most powerful life form on the planet. The mechanical creature dubbed Berserk would absorb machinery into itself before taking the form of Godzilla, believing him to be the dominant organism on the planet.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I don't know how they would have pulled that one off.
Yeah, it sounds like the visual effects maybe possibly would have been out of their wheelhouse.
Yeah, we would have had a $20 million budget instead of $9.5 million.
Yeah, something.
But I mean, it again, as we like to speculate, it would have been fun to see something different.
Yeah, it's always interesting how some of these concepts sometimes seem to start off with this kind of wild pitch, and then they kind of just get pared down to these sort of more formulaic and somewhat generic kind of plot lines and plot threads.
Yeah, I mean, you hear something from every movie that, the original script for this, or, this would have went this way. And, it's usually the budget why something doesn't work out. I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
But the last one I have for you, like I said, I only have a couple, is Godzilla's on camera again for nearly 27 minutes in this film, which is a series or a record in the franchise.
Yep. Not a bad record to have at all.
Nope. I like I said, I like his screen time in this. So I'll go ahead as we zoom along here, and I'll give you my favorite character.
Okay.
I liked Kazuma Aoki. I just liked his goofy mannerisms, and he when he got transferred to G-Force, he had no idea what was going on. He's a dinosaur nerd, which when I was younger, and still I am a dinosaur nerd. I like Jurassic Park, Godzilla, all that stuff. And again, in these films, I always look for somebody I can relate to. And he's just a guy. He's trying to do his job. He's trying to find someone to like think and talk about dinosaurs with. He's trying to live life and have a good time. And then he finds that they found like the dinosaur egg, and they don't know if it's a pteranodon egg or what it is. And I don't know what he steals from the lady's laboratory or office, but he's like, yeah, it must have just fell into my pocket, and he's just a funny character all around, and he's somebody, like I said, that I like to relate to when I pick my favorite character.
Yeah, I agree. He's my favorite character as well. He's a standout protagonist for these Heisei movies. This came out in December of '93. That's 6 months after Jurassic Park came out and took over the world and literally became the biggest movie at the box office of all time in June of '93. So I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone, especially a youngster, who wasn't a dinosaur enthusiast at that time. And yeah, you can always he's got that everyman thing going on where it's like he's part of G-Force and clearly a brilliant sort of mechanical engineer, as as the film displays, but he's got that out of his league. They're having him pilot Mechagodzilla and be part of that team and do the training and all these things, and he's got that everyman kind of charm, and he's trying to get the girl and not really having too much success, and he's kind of a screw up, and that's just that just makes for an interesting protagonist for one of these movies, and I've always liked him as well.
Yeah, in my opinion, there's not a lot to choose from in this film. Mickey, she's still not quite doing enough. She gets a little bit more in each film, and he was always the center of attention. He built that little pteranodon robot that was pretty cool, and he's flying around on it. He just a cool character. They gave him a couple of interesting traits for himself.
Mickey's still the perpetual queen, though. She's still the running overall top tier of the Heisei series. I'll never forget about Mickey.
Oh no, she's our Heisei go-to, but we just can't pick her for every episode.
Yeah, what do the weebs call them? The waifu.
The waifu.
Yeah, it's like WAIFU. It's like wife, but that's how you say it for like a Japanese like character. They're the waifu.
I learned something today.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, so you're not really much of an anime guy, are you?
No, not at all.
Fair enough. I am far from the biggest and baddest diehard anime guy. I don't like watch anime nonstop or anything, but the anime I do enjoy. So I am exposed to some of the anime lingo and terminology. So yeah, Miki Sagusa would be called the waifu by a lot of people in for the Heisei series. She's the waifu.
I'm 100% okay with that.
Yeah,
because
she's the wife material character.
Oh yeah, 100%. She cares about Godzilla just as much as we do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I know the answer for this one, but our favorite score. I'll let you go ahead.
I still get to go first. It's the main title. I'm sure it has some kind of official title on the soundtrack. I ain't too concerned with that. It's the main title theme that plays when they're putting together Mechagodzilla and revealing the Mechagodzilla and the title, and it's just got so much power. I'm sure you will cut it in and play it a little bit here, but it is just the jam for this movie, 100%.
Yes. I believe the official title is Mechagodzilla's theme, but it's also on the soundtrack. It's also labeled main title. So
There we go.
but yeah, the bass is back, you know.
Yeah, the
and
drums. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Ifukube, I mean,
It just encapsulates the scale and power, you know.
yeah, it does. It as soon as you get like the animated picture of Mechagodzilla where it does like the little and then it da-na-na-na, and it just hops in right away. The da. This is one of my favorite main tracks probably of the Godzilla franchise.
Yeah, it's so good that in the that in Shin Godzilla, into the credits of Shin Godzilla, they even sneak this track in over the ending credits, and it's on the Shin Godzilla Japanese CD that you can import from Japan. And so it's just a cool, like, it's still cool to see that 20 plus years after its release, people were still paying tribute to this cool track.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I mean, if you are listening to us right now and you haven't heard the main title for Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla from 1993, type it into Google or YouTube and put some headphones on, your Beats, your AirPods, whatever you got to listen to, your surround sound at home on the TV, and just turn it up and enjoy.
Yeah, it's a great track, and the score overall is exceptional. There's these great, like, when Kazuma's going through his training, they're sort of playing this kind of simplified version of the kind of G-Force military theme, the dun 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 dun, but it's being played with like I don't know, is that a flute or something, like a really reduced minimalist instrument and not the full orchestra. And even that, it's just like so good. There's so many just flashes of brilliance in the score for this movie. Ifukube was just, he knows how to take a movie that maybe in some scenes, the visuals and the things going on in the plot or on screen are not necessarily the most amazing or compelling. And like a John Williams, he will just add music that complements it so perfectly. And I love that.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to miss him in the next film for sure.
100%.
But I'll move on to the next one, and I'll give you my favorite quote, which was, again, Kazuma Aoki. And it's just because I get a little chuckle from this line where he arrives at G-Force, and he's kind of like reading about him, and he's like, hobbies, pteranodons. And he's like, don't you know what they are, sir? They're small flying dinosaurs. And you can just see his colonel or commander just slam his profile and get pissed off, like, all right, this is enough.
Yeah, no, this movie, it's so hard to pick a favorite kind of line, because Kazuma has so many like funny and interesting lines of dialogue. I was struggling to pick one, and I like his lines, like when he misses the one sequence where he's meant to pilot Mechagodzilla, and he's like, I just used some vacation days that I had coming toward me, sir. Like he's got so many kind of like zingers in this movie. And I another line of dialogue that I love is, I forget what the commanding officer's name is, but at the end of the movie, when Mechagodzilla's been defeated and the pod has crashed, the automated computer is saying, this ship has been destroyed, there are no survivors, the ship's been destroyed, there are no survivors. And then the commanding officer's like, well, you're wrong about that. And it turns out that like all of the crew survived. So like I love moments like that.
Oh, the damage level 10. This ship has been destroyed.
Yes.
There are no survivors.
Exactly. And then they all survived. Yeah. I always loved that as a kid, because when it's just zoomed in on the screen, you think like, oh wow, they're all dead, and then you get the reveal that none of them died.
Yeah, everyone in Mechagodzilla survived.
Yep.
Well, what's your favorite scene?
My favorite scene, I will unabashedly go for a hardcore monster scene, and it's absolutely Rodan powering up Godzilla and then Godzilla unleashing what is known as his super atomic blast. Breaking out the red and orange atomic blast and just absolutely wrecking Mechagodzilla with it. Like, that's the stuff of like legend for child me. It's like, what are you like? What, you kidding me? Like, he's got a red blast now, and it's like if you grow up on Dragon Ball Z or something, it's like Godzilla going Super Saiyan. It's like he's powered up. He's in like mode 2. He's on another level, and it's just just to see Godzilla take an extra level of power and just cut through his enemy like butter. It's just awesome to see, and it takes you back to being a kid when you watch it as an adult.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that scene. That is a great scene. And I always love when he gets charged and his heat ray goes red. But I chose the first fight against Mechagodzilla, where Mechagodzilla lands and Godzilla kind of just gives him a look like, the hell's this thing? What? And they get into battle, and Mechagodzilla starts kicking his ass. He's got him down. He's got his shock anchor in him, electrocuting him and whatnot. And Godzilla like reverses it with like, what is it? His atomic pulse or his nuclear pulse.
Yeah, there we go. I like that. The nuclear pulse. I like that.
And he reverses it and gets up and just knocks Mechagodzilla to the ground. And then everybody in the conference room watching just stands up and is like, oh my God, like, there goes millions of dollars and stuff like that. They absolutely can't believe that Godzilla just got up and overpowered and knocked Mechagodzilla to the ground. And I just love the part when the whole room, everyone in there just stands up and just looks dumbfounded.
Yeah, I love when Mechagodzilla is having early success against Godzilla and you have the military, general or whoever, I watched the dub, and the dub line is something to the effect of like, you see, Mechagodzilla can return your heat beam. We've got you, Godzilla. Like, he's like the confidence, and the stilted performance of the line. It just makes it very, very entertaining.
Absolutely, 100%. What do you say we go into some monster design?
Let's talk monsters.
Where do you want to go with it? You lead.
I won't really go into Godzilla's design because it's kind of a par for the course, but I love Mechagodzilla's look in this movie. It's got this sort of cool industrial, it just has a really, really cool and interesting look. And, it feels like functional and militaristic. And in the same way that the 70s one kind of felt a little alien in some ways, this one does feel a little bit more, it's like that sleek 90s version. And it just, I don't know. I think it's a cool design, and it moves in a kind of robotic way that I think really works.
Yeah, I like Mechagodzilla's design in this as well. He does have like the shorter tail, kind of like 74, and then his face is a little more smushed, like you said, a little more sleek. I love the plasma grenade. That thing is just a beast. Just knocks Godzilla right on his ass in one hit, and not too many things can do that.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, and I like, we always kind of talk about the sort of mouth and snout of Godzilla having that kind of squared off kind of look to it, and like they mimic that with Mechagodzilla's mouth. It's a very angular and squared off in a way that kind of mirrors Godzilla's. Yeah,
I mean this Mechagodzilla, I mean, I wouldn't say it's my favorite design. I guess
it's a very handsome Mechagodzilla design, though.
Right, it's almost like a proper design.
Yeah. It feels one that would be sort of, because clearly Mechagodzilla as a creation of the Japanese government as a tool against Godzilla would be just as much a sort of mascot as it would be a functional machine. So they built this one to look good. He's there to kick Godzilla's butt, but also to kind of look good doing it, so that Japan can kind of rally behind this machine as their hope against Godzilla. They've got their own robotic answer to Godzilla. The movie doesn't ever get much into like the culture at large and how the culture of Japan is reacting to these things, but you can kind of just imagine this would almost be like a propaganda device, and it's fun to fill in those gaps in your head.
Yeah, 100%. What did you think of Little Godzilla?
I liked the design. I liked the design because it feels like it's essentially a scaled down, more child version of the Godzillasaurus design that we get in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. So like it sort of, just as King Ghidorah contributes to Mechagodzilla's creation, they sort of have that through line going of the consistent Godzillasaurus design. Godzilla Jr. hasn't been irradiated yet, so he's still much more pure dinosaur than he is sort of monster. So I dig it. You can argue it's a little cutesy. It's a little kiddish somewhat, but I think it's a good design.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my lady, when the first time she watched this, of course she loved Manila or Minya, and I absolutely hated him. But of course, she found Little Godzilla in this very cute, and an updated design, and she found herself being like the lady who was his little kind of caretaker, I guess, and was like, yeah, I could do that.
Certainly. Definitely agree that it's an improvement on the Minya design. Like when you consider in 1993, you had just Minya or Manila, and then this was the next one. So comparing those two directly, it's like, yeah, this is kind of a big step in the right direction.
100%. And speaking of a big step in the right direction, I like this Rodan design. It doesn't look so cheap and kind of weathered and like weared and tatted down. It's actually a very sleek design, and I like how it's sculpted. It's a very sleek and clean design for Rodan, and I like this one a lot.
Yeah, the design and the proportions of it. The design is definitely it leans more into that pteranodon, pterodactyl, dinosaur type of look. The old Rodan, I think, was just kind of perceived and executed as maybe a bit more of just a flying monster, like a flying winged monster. Like they would put a guy in the suit, and the scale was sort of equivalent to Godzilla because there was a guy in the suit. And so this one sort of leans a bit more into making it a different kind of creature, more kind of how Mothra is, like not something that's like a man in suit, but a sort of smaller scale flying creature, sort of a different sort of family of creature that it's operating as. And I kind of dig that. And I mean, I also like that it's got this sort of red look, and that after battling Godzilla once, it also gets a breath attack, because it wouldn't be the Heisei series unless everyone had some sort of laser attack that they could animate.
Yeah, and it almost looks very similar to Batra's from the last film.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's got the purple glow to it. I don't think it's the exact same, but if it's very similar.
Yeah, and these as a kid, these sort of laser light shows and bright and vivid colors, and like the lightning bolts and energies and stuff that would always blast out of the monsters and surround the monsters, like that stuff's pure eye candy for a kid growing up in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, and to think about it, we were watching these on VHS. We didn't have high definition screens and stuff. I think I had like a little 21 or 25 inch TV or something in my room that I would watch these on. So, I mean, even back then, we didn't have 65 inch and 70 inch and whatever size HD TVs.
No 4K OLED back then. We were watching off cassette tape on standard definition.
Yeah. To get to our favorite part, we actually had to fast forward through the whole movie.
Exactly. Oh, I don't miss those days.
No. Let me skip chapters 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah. You know, if you were really good, you would pregame, and if you just wanted to watch a bunch of monster fights, you would find that spot on all of the VHSs, and then you could just pop the VHS in right at the monster fights.
Just start them from the beginning and watch each monster fight in a row.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the fun thing to do was, you know, you the closest thing you could do to make your sort of at-home music video would be to play music that you like to listen to while you turn the volume on the TV down and just watch the monster fights going. So you put on your favorite, you know, rock song of the day, and then all of a sudden you've got your own little homemade music video right there in front of you.
Oh man, the stuff that kept us entertained back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, do we want to wrapping up this fifth film in the Heisei series? Do we want to go into our tier ranking and see where she lands?
Yeah, we can get there and talk about it. I'll let you take it away on that one.
Making me go first.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sadly, I still think at the bottom is The Return of Godzilla. Coming in at the 4th spot is probably Godzilla vs. Mothra or Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Godzilla vs. Biollante, and still at number 1, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah.
All right. So of these that we've watched, I'll have Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah at the bottom. I would have Godzilla vs. Mothra, the next one up after that. I'll say Return of Godzilla in the number 4 spot, or the next spot up after that. Then Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and then Godzilla vs. Biollante at the top. I would say that this is probably, in terms of the fun that I have with it, this is probably second after Biollante and just a bit above Return of Godzilla. But that's a tough one. This and Return of Godzilla, in terms of their placement, I like each of them for very different reasons, but Biollante's still king, and for now I'll say Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla second behind it.
All right, well, being our 5th film, we got to get rid of one, and I have a feeling I know which one we're both going to get rid of. It's going to be different, but I know.
Well, and here's the interesting thing, because I'm trying to think in terms of, you know, I don't like to think of I'm just getting rid of the one I don't like the most, because that would be a very easy thing to do. And I'm trying to think of kind of like, well, what's the franchise left at if I drop out the movie that I don't want? And so I like this movie a lot. And this movie, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, it introduces Godzilla Jr., which is a prominent character. It introduces Godzilla having the super atomic blast, and it has a sense of strong continuity to Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. So for the sake of this, I will actually say that I will drop Godzilla vs. Mothra, and I'll keep the other ones, just for the sake of it's easier to drop that one out of the lineup than it is Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. As much as I might not like time travel shenanigans, it kind of is entrenched into the canon and the continuity. So I will drop Godzilla vs. Mothra and keep the others.
All right. Well, depending on how much you or how you feel about Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla next week, we'll see if King Ghidorah can make it another week.
Yeah, well, you know, if anyone's following my logic here, I think they can kind of predetermine what's probably going to become of Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla without me spoiling it. But I mean, you know, you live by the continuity, you die by the continuity.
And for me, it's all nostalgia and what I like. So sadly, as much as I like, you know, how he came back in '84, I am going to get rid of The Return of Godzilla.
Absolute
I know
slander.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that one stings.
Because if we didn't have that, we probably wouldn't have the rest of the Heisei era. But
But you know what? Screw all that, right? Who cares about continuity and the whole birth of the second wave of films? Whatever. You don't like it very much, so it's got to go.
Right.
Yeah.
We still got them other movies. We can't erase them now. So
yeah, they exist. This is a purely hypothetical situation.
absolutely. So we got 5 done. We're keeping 4. And I won't agree with you I won't disagree with you on your list, especially with Biollante being number 1, because like we said in that whole episode, that film's phenomenal.
Well, it's number 1 for now. We will see what happens. But if I'd ultimately, if we were to play the ultimate revisionist history, I probably, instead of making Return of Godzilla, I probably would have made it more or less a reboot. I wouldn't have made it a sequel to the 54 movie. I probably would have just made it a new launch of the character, just so it didn't have any pre-existing continuity to latch onto or connect to. But that's just me.
Well, hey, again, beggars can't be choosers for us.
Nope.
History's
written. History's written. Can't change it.
No, sometimes you wish you could, but that's why it's history.
Yeah, but it's interesting that I talk about the films to keep and skip, because if you look at it, we'll talk about this more as it gets on. But there's sort of there's a few different ways that you could kind of choose to take in the Heisei series. There's the version that includes every movie, but then there's kind of it sort of has this every other vibe in terms of some of the movies and how they connect. Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla doesn't really acknowledge or connect to Godzilla versus Mothra at all, but it has some strong connections to Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. And likewise, Godzilla versus Mothra doesn't really have anything to do with Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. But then when you get to Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, it has a lot of strong references to Biollante and Godzilla versus Mothra. We see Mothra and the fairies again, but it doesn't have a ton of strong connections and references to Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla or Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. So there's sort of this like weird thing where it's like Godzilla versus Space Godzilla is almost more of a sequel to Godzilla versus Mothra than it is to Mechagodzilla. The only thing that is kind of an oddity is that, little Godzilla shows up out of nowhere in Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, but his origin is in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. So it's a unique, there's a lot of different sort of mixing and matchings that you could do, but that's the sort of stuff that keeps me up nights, I suppose.
Yeah, you could take one film out of the beginning of the Heisei era, the middle, or the end, and it's a completely different story.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it can kind of jive up and kind of not jive up and link up and not link up. It is interesting. But I'm overall a fan of the stronger continuity they tried to maintain.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to continue talking about this, and next week we'll follow up this film with Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, which was released on December 10th of 1994. So with that being said, is there anything else you have for Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla or Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2?
No. Dumb title. Don't like that it forces time travel into the continuity of the series, but you live with that. Outside of that, this one is just a sort of peak kind of great kind of representation of a Godzilla movie. If you just want to throw a random one on for someone that's never seen one, it's like you pop this bad boy in and people are going to have a good time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I agree with you 100%. This is one of the ones, if you haven't seen or you're not a fan of the Godzilla franchise or just haven't watched them yet, if this is one of the ones that give it a try, Godzilla shows up bright and early in the film, like just under 15 minutes, and from there on out, you get monster action quite a bit throughout the film. So if you're not looking for a bunch of characters and whatnot, and you're looking for a lot of monster action, this is one of the ones to go to.
Yeah, and the human, the human interaction, they integrate the humans by making them the pilots of Mechagodzilla. They put the principal characters sort of within the action, which I always like very much. You get a lot of Godzilla movies where it's the humans just kind of watching it happen, and when you have Mechagodzilla piloted by humans, that's a great way to kind of keep the humans within the action, and I like that about this movie a lot.
Yep, for sure. I 100% agree with you on that as well. But if that's all we got, then again, it's going to be Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla next week. So I will say, Chris, I appreciate you and thank you for joining me yet again on this, what was it, 20th episode of Godzilla?
Yeah, something like that.
I believe it is the 20th episode. So we are getting there slowly but surely.
We are over the halfway point.
A whole 55%.
Yep.
But all right.
Happy to be here as always. See everybody again next week.
Absolutely. Again next week, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. But until next time.